Welcome to Getting Ghosted. This is an Intuitive Soul Collective podcast, and I'm your host, Allie Horner. Welcome back, everybody. Today's episode is going to be really interesting and really fun. But before we get started, I wanted to make mention that this podcast nor any of my work is meant to be a replacement for professional mental health or medical advice. So before we get started, just keep in mind too that these interpretations and the things I talk about are just my interpretations and my unique experiences. You may think about things or understand things very differently, and that's totally okay. So here we go. Let's get started and welcome back. So today we have a listener question. Someone wrote in and wrote this really beautiful long email about a dream that she had, and I'm going to piece together as much as I can without divulging any personal information of hers, and then I will go through and give my guides insight and interpretation on what happened to her. So I hope that you enjoy this episode, and I'm curious to hear if anyone else has had similar experiences. So after you listen, make sure that you drop us a line in the Patreon group or submit a podcast question on the podcast submission page and let me know if you've had a similar experience or if you have heard of this before. So this listener wrote in about her dream, and she said she was at a spiritual spa of some sort, and this was kind of a tropical looking, palm trees, really lush green area sort of spa with this type of like oasis and ancient ruins all around it. And she said she wasn't really sure how she got there, or what time period she was in, but it felt like she was in the eternal now and very present. And so there was a woman who guided her through to get her treatments, etc. And she said she didn't really recognize this woman, but it was almost as though this woman had this hypnotic and it sounds to me like this was like a spiritual guide was my initial instinct on this. And she said that the spa had this like serenity and essential energy, and she felt like she was just enveloped in it, and that it wasn't creepy at all. It was kind of like this very blissed out feeling. And she said she actually had that like first day of school kind of jitters, and she knew that she wanted to be there and she was really ready to have the experience. So there was this sort of locker room where she got changed out of her clothes and into a robe, and she was then guided to this like table, which was a very luxurious feeling experience for her. And she said that she immediately felt at peace and comfortable. And she said the sounds of creek water and birds and nature just made her effortlessly slip into a deep meditative state. And she was suddenly surrounded by hands of others who were leading her through this experience. And she said it was kind of like a combination of Reiki and massage, except she didn't see anyone around her. She just could feel them. She said there was just the one beautiful woman who had guided her to that point and who was still guiding her through the experience, kind of energetically, making sure she was comfortable and okay throughout all of it. But she basically said there was energy all around her, easing her into feeling more relaxed, and eventually she started releasing any and all ego or insecurity or shyness. And she said she had fully surrendered to only the pleasure energetically and sensually. So through this sort of Reiki energy work massage from these invisible hands, she ended up reaching this full body, almost like a climax blissgasm type of state. And she said it was unlike anything that she had ever experienced in 3D reality. And she said it was like a soulgasm. Her entire presence and senses were tingling in a way she had never felt before. And then she woke up. And she said the first thought she had was, oh my God, Kundalini. Wait, did that really happen? That was incredible. And she said all of her senses still felt completely heightened. Her entire body was tingling in a post-orgasm kind of way, except more intense. And she said, especially considering I did not have any sort of 3D physical sexual experience. So it was kind of surprising for her to wake up feeling as though she had. And she said, I looked down at my body and much to my surprise, I was fully clothed and I was still in my jeans, which were fully zipped and buttoned because she had fallen asleep on the couch. So she was like, I don't know what's going on. And she said it was 4 a.m. when she woke up, which I want to point out as well. And she said she went to her bed and got changed and then she just passed out. And she said when she tried to describe this to her partner, they kind of like gave her a little like giggity side smile, brow, a little like, ooh, type of thing. But it wasn't really like that at all for her. It was just very, very different. And so she was encouraged by her sister to reach out to someone to talk about what she experienced and just see what they had to say. And she also followed this up by saying, this is why she reached out. And she said, I want to let you know I dream a lot, and I have my whole life. My mom's always referred to these as my premonitions. And she said she's had spirits come to her in dream state several times, but she's never experienced anything like this before. And she basically said she didn't expect to hear back, but she was curious about our interpretation and all of that fun stuff. And so a lot of her questions were, do you have any idea what this dream was? Is it even possible for a Kundalini awakening experience to happen during the subconscious REM state, dream state? Do you have any idea the significance of this, or the woman guiding me through it? Or could this have been a vision of future or other timeline or dimension? And she said, and if this was something, now what? Like, what do I do afterward? Because it's such an interesting experience. And so I wanted to tune in and see what my guides, I already have my own thoughts kind of popping in about what was going on and what's happening. And I do have Eric and Sam here, which she particularly thanked in her email. So I will bring everyone through and see what they have to say about her question. Okay, so we've got Eric and Sam, and Eric is over here and he's rubbing his hands together like, woo, hoo, hoo, this is some fun stuff. And Eric's like, juicy. He said the word juicy. And he said, it is. It's a juicy spiritual experience. And he's showing like when you take a bite out of a peach or you take a bite out of a fresh mango. And he's showing like, they're making all sorts of lewd jokes over there. But Sam is over here saying it really is a heightened experience. And he said, but it's all of your senses. And he said, going far above and beyond just the 5 senses that you have here. And he said, so really, he said, it's quite sensual is the way he's putting it. But basically he's saying, yeah, so this is a full Kundalini awakening experience. And he said, it's actually very, very possible and actually very likely that it would happen in a dream state or in a deeply meditative state, because he said most people have to get to a point where their conscious mind actually sort of turns off. So the dream state or a deeply meditative state are when these things tend to happen. And I have had Kundalini awakenings a very long time ago. My first one was like, literally, I just felt this energy guiding me to just lie down because I was already starting to feel what was about to happen. And I went into this deeply meditative state, and I had basically, it's hard to describe because you're not doing anything with your hands. You're not with a partner. There is, for all intents and purposes, no physical sexual contact happening, but it feels like a full body blissgasm. Like you have bliss rolling up and down your spine and out your extremities and up through the top of your head. And it goes on and on. Mine was like an hour long the first time I had one. And then I had mini ones repetitively for months afterward, like day after day after day, sometimes more than once a day. And sometimes they would be very short bursts, and sometimes they would be like a half hour long. And I would see all sorts of colors and visions and images. But it had nothing to do with any sort of like manual stimulation. There was no masturbation. There was no sexual contact with anyone else during this time. I wasn't even thinking about that. And when I first had my Kundalini awakening, people were like, well, how did you do something to cause it? And I was like, no, I didn't even know it was possible. I didn't know what a Kundalini awakening was. I wasn't trying to do that. I had just been meditating a lot because I was looking for relief from like lifelong, really bad social anxiety. So I had just started meditating a lot in the couple of months prior, and found a lot of relief from meditation, which I think changed my brain and opened the energy centers, which Eric is showing me the map of the body and all these energy pathways. And he's showing it as this very crystalline, shimmery pink energy going all throughout different pathways through the body. And he said, yeah, it's kind of like when you often, for a lot of people, he's like, you guys spend a lot of time bottling up emotions and trying to turn off your sensations and he said, you hold a lot of energy for a lot of you guys around your shoulders. Some of you guys hold a lot of energy in your hips. Some of you guys really turn off energy around your hips or sensation around certain body parts because of trauma or overuse of those areas, or because of really strong feelings or emotions that are just too uncomfortable. He said sometimes it's an injury or an illness that causes that numbing out. Sometimes it's just that the world is too much. It's too overwhelming and too overstimulating. So you kind of like turn off those sensory things. And he's showing me how the vessel is actually an amazing tool. And he said, it's really that you're a spiritual being having a human experience, and the human experience is to understand and use this divine technology that is the body. So he's showing how during a Kundalini awakening, he's like all that meditation or being in REM state or in your dream state, it allows you to shift dimensionally. And he's showing because your brain is operating differently. And he said it's really a wonderful thing to see when other people are able to access this kind of intelligence. So the Kundalini energy is really about divine intelligence filling up your entire energetic body, even if you've never had that experience before. And he said a lot of people don't even have this experience with, he said normal sex or with a partner or even masturbation. And so they can't even fathom what we're talking about. And he said, even people who've had really, big O's, he said, he said, it's powerful, but it's not the same thing. And so he said, I want to kind of just say to anyone who's thinking, oh, well, I've had a really great, it's not the same. And it is a really wonderful experience. Like for me, I said, as I mentioned before, I had just been meditating a lot, and I had read the book Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, which if you guys have read that, it has nothing to do with sex. So it was kind of surprising for me too. Like I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I did. But I do really believe that's what happened for this listener. I fully believe she had a full-blown, sexual, but more of a Kundalini awakening, which isn't just about sex. It's really about the divine energy and divine frequency that sexual energy comes from when it is part of this fully consensual, like blissgasm, and it's a full body experience that lights up all of your chakras, lights up every part of your body that might have been quote unquote offline, or that we might have been kind of like pushing aside before. And the reason you're able to experience it is because that conscious mind got out of the way in the dream state. So now they did want to answer, and they're saying it is significant for her that she went through this because she'll see the effects of it in her waking life, in a sense, because when people have these Kundalini experiences, they begin to be way more telepathic than normal. Even if they were very psychic or intuitive or mediums before, it's almost like their gifts or their abilities end up being a lot stronger, almost like they're on steroids. They end up also having other sorts of things that start to happen, like they're able to channel energy in brand new ways. And they're able to do a lot of things that they wouldn't expect. And so again, like they have a lot more premonition, they have a lot more psychic ability. They may have, he's saying, though, we want you to be really careful with trying to attain this because it does push a lot of energy up and out too. So sometimes people have an emotional clearing or an energetic clearing, and they can have some cognitive dissonance that hits almost like their brain struggles to make sense of what happened, and things that were repressed can kind of bubble up and come to the surface. So he said it's very important too that you're just like making sure you get support if you're really struggling with it, professional support. Okay. So not a psychic or a medium. We're not licensed mental health professionals unless we state otherwise and have licenses in that. I don't personally have a license in any of that, but this is just my interpretation of what happened. But so he keeps saying it's really important though that you know that this is a totally natural experience, and this is something that will happen more and more for people. And it actually happens for quite a few people who never discuss it with anyone because they don't know who to discuss it with. And there are a lot of people who have been put in loony bins because they were describing what was just a natural surge of energy. And he's showing from the base of the spine all the way up and through and out the crown of the head. It literally almost feels like you have liquid light that, is coming up out of the base of your spine up through your crown and almost like cracking an egg over your head. And it is the most soothing, relaxing, and blissful feeling that you could ever have. I remember when I had mine, I suddenly stopped having migraines anymore. And I had used to have migraines prior to that. And I had a couple of times when I was going through these really consistent like Kundalini experiences for months, where at one point I had started to get a slight fever and hadn't got a flu shot that year. My son got the flu. I was married at the time, so my husband at the time had the flu. By all intents and purposes, I knew like I'm getting the flu, but then I laid down and meditated and had this Kundalini experience just for a couple of minutes. And this fever that I was coming down with, and I knew I was at like 102, just suddenly just snapped right out of my body. And I came out of this meditation and my fever and the flu never came back and never hit. And I had not taken any medication. I had not done anything else. There was no special herbalist type of things I had done. I wasn't really into that at the time. And so it just was like my body had somehow, with this surge of Kundalini energy, which is very high frequency energy, it just healed whatever this fever was. So again, not a medical professional. I don't know how it all works. I don't know why it happened that way. It just did. So I'm not making any promises to anyone, but I did find it really interesting. So one thing that Erica's saying too is that the significance for this listener and is in the woman guiding them through it is definitely a spiritual guide. But this, he said, it has to do with like tantra, and he's saying the word tantra and a tantric release of energy. And he said this can cause the senses to surge as well. And he said you might want to spend some time, for this listener or anyone else who's really feeling resonance with this, spend some time going and researching, places and people that might resonate with what you were seeing with this time period, because you might find a little bit more of a clue as to where your spiritual journey or where your spiritual guides want to take you. And if you were to meditate, you might be able to actually connect with this woman again and have her speak to you and tell you, explaining a little bit more of what she's doing. Or she may be able, sometimes they don't talk like tangibly talk back and forth. Sometimes you close your eyes and you go into kind of this deeper meditative state, and they can almost like telepathically download information for you, where you just come out of that state just knowing. And so I think there's going to be more there for this person. I also think at this time we are reintegrating and reacclimating and bringing forward it feels like ancient wisdom and divine technology. So things that were much more advanced than what we would know in the Western world now. And I think our dream states, our spiritual guides, experiences like this with Kundalini energy, they're all here to help us bring all of that knowledge back to the forefront and then integrate it and bring it fully online, so that we can begin to use all of our abilities and gifts and to fully live, to really live like fantastic lives while we're here on earth. A lot of us, like, we really struggle with being in the physical form, but when we bring everything back online, rather than being completely overwhelmed, we actually feel a lot more comfortable and more acclimated to the physical state. So a lot of people avoid feeling, for example, they avoid all of the energetic sensitivity that they have. And actually what you need to be doing is facing those feelings and feeling them fully and letting your body acclimate to them, because those feelings and that energy you're picking up is information. And so when we have these Kundalini awakenings, it's kind of just like we're bringing the whole system back online. Like, the guides always say to me, we live in ecstasy, we live in bliss, because we don't have the physical form to try and control and to try to block it out. The physical form is actually capable of feeling bliss and peace all the time, but you guys really repress it and suppress all of that. So it's not like you wouldn't have negative emotions, but you would always have this wave of creative energy and bliss that sits in love, that sits behind those or underneath those emotions all the time, that you would know is always there. And Eric was telling me that even when you experience negative emotions, a lot of people understand that there's almost this aliveness behind them. And that's why some people become kind of addicted to negative experiences or chaotic emotions. And he said, you can create without having to go through negative emotions all the time. But some people find, like, almost like the tortured artist type of trope. It's almost like they feel like they need to have chaotic negative experiences in order to have heightened states of bliss and creativity and ecstasy afterward, which isn't exactly true. But he said it's kind of like two sides of the same coin. And he said, now, in terms of this person, though, it might be really beneficial for them to connect with this woman from the dream or with their guides and say, hey, like, what else you got for me? And let this kind of unfold over time and see what else downloads through for you. The other thing that he is saying is, it's kind of like it is another dimensional reality, but you don't have to consider it outside of yourself. If you are dreaming of it, it is in your timeline, it is in your dimension, it is in your consciousness. You don't have to think of it as outside of you in the past or in the future, or that it's inaccessible. If you experience it, it's part of you already. So, again, it kind of like trumps that physical space and time type of thing that we have here on Earth. I really feel like more and more people are starting to experience these types of things because we are experiencing what is the rise of the feminine, and we're starting to experience this shift in consciousness from fear into love. And so that's not just an emotional shift, that is a consciousness shift. That's a dimensional shift. These are bigger, larger changes that are happening throughout the world, and different people will feel them and experience them in different ways at different times. And yet there are so many experiences that people have in common. It is flippin' uncanny. And I feel like I'm a little bit more exposed to it just because of the nature of my work and how many people I talk to because of my readings and my channelings and teaching on a day-to-day basis. So I likely see a lot more of those common threads than the average person would see, especially because of the type of things I talk about and the types of things other people share with me. So keep in mind, like even, this listener sharing the story, this is not an uncommon thing for me to hear. I actually have been hearing about stuff like this from people and getting asked about things like this from people for years and years and years. And I've been doing this work professionally for just over a decade now. And like I said, this has been going on from the very beginning because it is so confusing for people, especially in a society that has, it's like weirdly schmex positive, but also kind of repressed. And also a lot of us feel like there's a lot lacking with it. And with the spiritual awakening we're having, it's almost like it's bringing so many things back online that a lot of us are going to have more and more of these Kundalini surges and these higher energetic experiences. And it's going to be very confusing for us to understand if the only reference we've ever had to this type of bliss or that can be transmuted or felt throughout the body has been shown to us in movies with shallow, or in everyday life with shallow, or, even if they're very loving sexual experiences, they don't quite compare to what these people are experiencing. It's almost like, having different flavors of ice cream, except one of them is one that you can feel through your whole body and has sprinkles and it's the whole sundae, versus just having, mint chip or, Rocky Road. I feel like this is probably not the best metaphor, but you guys kind of get what I'm saying. It's like when you're having something that you've just had all the time and you're like, okay, I understand this and I get it. But then there's something completely new where you're like, I don't even know how to describe what I'm experiencing. And I feel like many people haven't described it or experienced it, so I don't know how to articulate it. That's what it kind of feels like to go through these experiences, and there will be more and more people having them as we shift states of consciousness, because as that happens, more and more of our physical form will come online in order to integrate all these amazing higher energies. And so I have to personally say, when this started to happen to me, a previous anxiety girly, didn't have anxiety anymore. I still feel anxiety at times, but it's not my constant all day, everyday state. It's more a reaction to a specific situation or stressor in the environment from time to time. And it doesn't take over my day anymore. It's kind of just like it washes over me. I started to have more consistent joy. Like I said, all of my senses heightened and went online. I started seeing clairvoyantly. I started hearing clairaudiently, overnight when this started happening. I was able to see much more physically, seeing auras and colors and sparks around people. And excuse me, guys, I just burped into the microphone. Sorry. I don't want to interrupt myself talking though. But I had all these wonderful, wonderful experiences. And it was like all of my other senses started to heighten and overlap. So when I would taste something, I could feel it in my heart at the same time. When I would be at a concert listening to music, I could see the sounds as pops of color and sparks of light at the same time flowing through the air. These are the types of things I started to have happen all the time. I could hear the sounds in my body. I could feel other people's emotions. So that's a lot of the stuff that happens with Kundalini awakenings. And that stuff can happen without the Kundalini, but it's just an example of how that higher, energy kind of soaks through us or moves through us and flows through us and sort of turns all of those other senses on, which leads to a lot more of these sort of spiritual experiences. That's actually these quote unquote spiritual things are actually how we're meant to be working anyways. We just have spent so much time repressing feelings and emotions and all the sensory energy that we pick up and that we exude and give out. We spend so much time repressing all that we normally don't have Kundalini experiences. So again, these experiences also can be very, they can trigger a little bit for people initially, but they also can be immensely healing. So I hope that this is really helpful for everyone listening. And I'm very open to hearing your questions. Feel free to pop them again into the Patreon groups. I will link that up in the show notes, and or reach out to me through the podcast page on my website. And thank you guys so much for listening.